Welcome to TRT World and beautiful Pristina. I am Semir Sejfovic, and in this week's Across the Balkans, we bring you the latest stories from the region and how governments, countries, and populations are affected. Kosovo is facing one of its worst political crises since independence. 6 months after February's elections, parliament remains paralyzed. Lawmakers have failed more than 50 times to elect a speaker, the first step towards forming a government. For many young Kosovans, the deadlock reflects both stalled future and power struggles among politicians. Semir Sejfovic has more from Pristina.
The failure to elect a speaker has halted Kosovo's political journey, as the winning party from the February election has been unable to secure a minimal coalition to govern the country.
Ne kemi fituar zgjedhjet, lëvizjave të vendosur 48 deputet, subjekti i dytë dhe i tretë, PDK dhe LDK, marrë së bashku nuk bëjnë 28. Njëra i ka 24, tjetra i ka 20, kur ti mbledhësh bashkë bëjnë 44, s'bëjnë 28. Tash fituesi është i qartë, s'ka qenë asnjëherë kaq i qartë.
For months, opposition parties have refused to vote for the candidate proposed by caretaker Prime Minister Albin Kurti.
Ne do të duhej që të merreshim vesh, por ne nuk u morëm vesh, siç e dini. Ndërkohë, ne duhet të qeverisim, sepse i kemi kompetencat e kufizuara, por punët i kemi të shumta.
For Kosovo's younger generation, politics feels distant and unresponsive. This ongoing parliamentary stalemate, now in its 6th month, is more than a political crisis, it's a barrier to opportunity.
Kur ti nuk mundesh me bërë një qeveri, për pret që mundesh me bërë një tjetër, kur gjë s'mundesh me bërë tjetër sen. Para nisë që to ma të letën. S'ki që a bën, po, ka një votu, somet, veç më ndru krejt.
Pas mungesë vullnetit politike na të bëjmë me mungesën e ndërgjegjës kolektive. Është pa përgjegjësi e të gjithë atyre që kanë fituar karrikën e tyre në Kuvendin e Republikës Kosovës.
Demokracia është kompromis. E pa kompromis nuk ka demokraci, më fal.
For Kalzo.com editor-in-chief Kreshnik Gashi, the issue stems from a bitter election campaign marked by extreme hate speech as well as demonization of political opponents.
E tërë situata është çështje e pazareve politike dhe pazareve të vendimare, se kush në cilat pozicione do të vendoset në të ardhmen, në cilat do të jenë koalicionet për qeverinë e ardhshme dhe për zgjedhjen e presidentit, po dhe të kryekumvendarit. Është një situatë e krizës për shkak të dështimit për me ndërtu koalicione dhe me ndërtu një mazhorancë e cila rrin me qeverisë vendin.
Political analyst Hysamettin Feraj lists 3 main factors behind the stalemate.
Etja pa kontrolluar për pushtete e opozitës me çdo mjet dhe çdo rrugë, është mungesa e kulturës politike, demokratike, edhe në mas të gjerë përveçërisht e opozita, dhe si rrjedhoj ose si aspekt i mungesës kulturës demokratike, politike, është mos respektimi kushtetutës.
Feraj says the opposition is trying to impose itself at all costs in order to seize the post of parliamentary speaker.
Ky është një uzurpim i pushtetit që i takon subjektit fitues të zgjedhjeve. Kushtetuta është e qartë që kryetarin e kuvendit e propozon subjekti fitues i zgjedhjeve. Pik. Nuk ka asnjë kurthim tjetër.
It appeared that this time Kosovar citizens preferred to vote for a coalition government.
Mirë, po partia e fituese si duket nuk është e gatshme për një kompromis apo bashkëpunim të tillë, andaj jemi tani më jo në një ngërç politik, por do të thoja më shumë në një ngërç shtetëror.
With local election approaching, Canaj does not foresee any rapprochement among political forces. He believes the situation is intentional.
Partia fituese po dëshiron që ta shtyjë këtë situatë, që të mbahen eventualisht zgjedhjet e jashtëzakonshme para zgjedhjeve komunale, që të vazhdojë me narrativin e saj për sovranitetin e veri.
Behind me, the Assembly of Kosovo stands idle, a symbol of a political process at a standstill. More than 50 failed attempts to elect a speaker have left the country without a functioning parliament or government for 6 months. The Constitutional Court has now given MPs just weeks to resolve the deadlock. But with rival blocs unwilling to compromise, the real question is whether Kosovo's leaders can rise above political divisions.
Feraj believes new election could be a way out of the crisis. He also pushes back against those who claimed the vote would place a heavy burden on the state budget.
Kjo është i vështirësim demokracisë, edhe të themi nëse demokracia kushton shumë, nuk e blej. Nëse kushton pak, e blej. Pra është një pazar për vlerat demokratike, të përmendet se votimet kushtojnë.
Analysts agree that in Kosovo's current political crisis, no one benefits, and everyone bears a cost. And the greatest cost is borne by the citizens themselves.
Humbi Kosova, përfituesi janë ata të cilët gjithmonë në narrativin e tyre i kanë paraqitur Kosovën si shtet të dështuar, ata janë Serbia dhe Rusia.
Humrit gjithmonë janë qytetarët, ata që i paguajnë taksat, fitues në këtë situatë mendoj që të gjithë janë duke kalkuluar si të nxirren më mirë prej situatës.
As Kosovo's leaders trade blame and stall compromise, the cost is measured not only in political paralysis, but in the erosion of public trust. Until consensus is found, the promise of democracy here remains on pause. Omer Saraci, Across the Balkans, Pristina.
We speak to Dr. Ramadan Ilazi, Head of Research at the Kosovar Center for Security and former Deputy Minister for European Integration, for in-depth analysis on Kosovo's parliamentary deadlock and what it means for the country's political future and security. We're seeing a huge political and security shift in the Balkans occur, particularly in Kosovo, which has struggled to form government. Yeah. What is the actual reason for the struggle of Kosovo's political elite to form a government?
There is deep distrust between the current political elites in Kosovo. We have a party from Mr. Kurti, Vetëvendosje, Self-Determination Party, who has been leading the country for the last 5 years or so. It won in a historical landslide victory in 2021 elections, 50%, a little over 50% of the vote. But Vetëvendosje Party represents a new political elite in Kosovo, and the current opposition in the mind of the Vetëvendosje represent the old political elite. And there has been bad blood, as they say, between these two groups. Although Vetëvendosje in the past governed when Mr. Kurti first became prime minister, he was in coalition with the Democratic League of Kosovo, and there were relatively good cooperation there until Mr. Kurti's positions upset the relations between Kosovo and the United States, and so his junior partner in the government, Democratic League, decided to leave the coalition. And then they ended up leading the government themselves. So the reason, there are different factors. One is this, as I said, more bad blood between what is perceived as a new political elite and the old political elite. The other is, I think, on par with Mr. Kurti's trait as a political leader. He is difficult to compromise with. He has very strong positions that his party came first in the elections. They won 42% of the vote. So less than the last elections, but still very commendable majority. So he believes as the first party now he has certain rights, and then those certain rights, such as who should be the Speaker of the Parliament of Kosovo or President of the Kosovo Assembly, shouldn't be subject of compromise or negotiation with opposition. So fundamentally, Mr. Kurti doesn't have the votes to form the new institutions, it is clear. And he doesn't seem to be willing to compromise on certain issues with the opposition parties in order to get their support to elect a new speaker and so on. So this has been, I think, central to the current crisis.
How dangerous is it for Kosovo not to have a government?
It's very dangerous because not having a government in Kosovo since February when we had the elections is very irresponsible and irrational. And it makes the country very vulnerable to malign foreign influence. And we know that countries like Russia, but even Serbia, actively work in keeping the situation unstable in Kosovo. On the other hand, this situation also offers an opportunity for Kosovo, especially what is happening in Serbia. Kosovo could, if we were to move in a mature, rational manner, create the new institutions. I think this would have put a lot of pressure on Serbia and President Vučić to perhaps also act on itself. But as situation deteriorates in Serbia as well, and as we don't have a government, we can see where we might be able to elect a new government in Kosovo. We will be able to move with a normalization dialogue, but Serbia might not be. In a case where potentially Serbia elects a new elite as well, although from our perspective, some of the language in these protests don't seem to indicate a lot of change, but we know these protests are a mixture of everything there. There are also genuine students, civil society leaders who want normalization of relations with Kosovo. And our situation, we cannot afford these kind of losses of opportunities, because Kosovo is not recognized by 4 NATO member states and 5 EU member states. We're not yet, let's say, UN member state to have some kind of insurance policy. You know, a situation where our image or perception of Kosovo worsens among our allies. And right now, this seems to be the situation.
Do you believe that the rising tensions in Balkans are getting to a very dangerous point if we take into consideration the protests in Serbia, the arming of Serbia, for example, now by Israel of more than 1.6 billion US dollars in arms, and why is Serbia getting those weapons if it is constantly stressing the point that it is in a defensive capacity? Who is, I guess, from Kosovo's perspective, Serbia in fear of?
We also see this proclamation by Serbia that it's a neutral country not in par with the reality. One of our major concerns is what Serbia called Project 5000. So Serbia is investing in building up its capacities of its special forces, both in police and in the army. The objective is to have 5,000 members of special forces in these, both in police and the army. And we wonder why would a country that says it's neutral and it's seeking only cooperation with others is increasing cooperation that would only make sense for a country that is preparing for special operations, like what Russia did in Ukraine. And also, when you look at their security doctrine, they see Kosovo as somehow occupied territory or temporarily occupied territory. So when you consider Kosovo like an occupied territory, then it stands to reason you're preparing for some kind of liberation of that territory. So the threat from Serbia for a potential military incursion in Kosovo should never be ignored, I think. However, we have Kosovo under NATO protection by a UN Security Council resolution. So as long as you have Kosovo under NATO umbrella, I think any kind of scenario in Serbia for potential military incursion is I think, a bit far-fetched. However, our concern is who actually is in charge of military in Serbia.
Why is Serbia claiming to be in a defensive capacity if we take into consideration the wars of the 19th in Croatia, in Bosnia, in Kosovo, in Slovenia? Who is actually the threat in the Balkans?
From our perspective, the threat, clearly from the security perspective, if you were an analyst and you're putting A and B together, it is Serbia, because it is a country that is deeply involved in strategic cooperation with Russia, deeply involved in strategic cooperation with China. Both of these countries considered by EU and US to a certain level as malign countries. Everyone else in the region has a clear Euro-Atlantic integration perspective. So if you talk to Bosnians, they want to join NATO and EU. If you talk to Montenegrins, they want to join NATO and EU. Albanians, Macedonians, Kosovars. So the only country where there is no clarity about this is Serbia, and especially in relation to NATO. So from that perspective, if you have a country who doesn't really want to be part of these security and political arrangements, but at the same time is building military capabilities, then it is seen with a concern from a security perspective. But one point I want to raise is the question you asked at the beginning: why is this Serbia, kind of like indulged with this kind of behavior? Is that after the war ended, we never had in our region a kind of accountability for what happened. everyone, the narrative of the EU and the US was that everyone was, in a way, equal. Yeah, everyone was a victim and everyone was a perpetrator. And so, because I think they wanted Serbia to be part of the new reality, to bring it on board. So I think after a NATO bombing, probably in the EU and the West, and especially after Kosovo's independence, there was a sense that now we need to deal with Serbia. Now we need to kind of manage Serbia, work with this country so that all these kind of things don't have a consequence where the country moves further towards Russia. So, but this strategy hasn't worked. We clearly see it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked for Serbia. It hasn't detached more from Russia. It has deepened ties with Russia, and it hasn't made the country more democratic or more West-oriented. And we see the demonstrations in Serbia as a clear indicator that the people there are also had enough of this autocracy of President Vučić. But again, what is concerning for us is that among these people, they still then are chanting slogans that are not so democratic, let's say, the least. But the point there is that the approach of the West and the EU has failed both the Serbian state and the Serbian people.
Once near extinction, the Euro-Asian Lynx is making a comeback in Slovenia. Gökçen Ardic visits the Ljubljana Zoo to meet those working to protect one of Europe's most elusive predators.
In the heart of Slovenia's capital, the Ljubljana Zoo is home to more than just exotic animals. It's playing a vital role in one of Slovenia's most ambitious wildlife conservation efforts. Zoo veterinarians possess valuable medical experience with many species. We are here to see the captive lynx, as it is our only chance to see them from up close.
At Ljubljana Zoo, we currently keep 3 adult male lynxes. They're all senior animals, around 18 years old. They all originate from zoos because, in the last 20-30 years, it's become a norm that we only source animals from other zoos from our zoo, not from the wild. We only keep animals that were bred in captivity. That means that they know fences, they know the enclosures, so they don't have problems with adapting to these conditions.
These lynx can't return to the wild, but they help raise awareness for those that can. Their stories are deeply connected with their wild cousins, who've been fighting to survive in increasingly fragmented habitats.
Eurasian lynx was since many years considered the most endangered mammal or even general animal in Slovenia. So it became, for a long time, discussion that something has to be done to prevent it, otherwise it might get extinct. So the main idea of this project was first step to prevent extinction of this animal species here, and the other one is also to reintroduce it in part of Slovenia where it was already extinct. And there's quite some research done before, so we knew that the main problem for this population was the inbreeding. So the only short-term solution was to capture some lynx in another population and transport it and release it in Slovenia and neighboring countries to give the lynx options to mate with non-related animals.
Over the past 7 years, scientists, researchers and veterinarians from across Europe have joined forces to launch the Live Lynx project, relocating animals from genetically healthier populations to Slovenia.
So in the end it worked very well. In this project we managed to capture 18 lynx, Slovakia and Romania. They were translocated. In parallel we did quite detailed monitoring to see what's happening with the population, with their genetic status, but also how local public responds to these translocations. Because when you're moving large carnivores, there can be some concerns from other local people, right? Translocations were very successful, most of the animals survived. They also quickly start reproducing, the population start increasing, and already during the first 5 years of the project, population increased for 40%, which was, we consider a great success because, remember this population was on the way to get extinct. So the trend was reversed and also started increasing quite fast. Inbreeding decreased a lot with this introduction of new animals. The health problems diminished. We also observed that reproduction increased. The, let's say, number of kittens in the litter was much bigger than it was before.
But relocating an apex predator is never easy. Lynx are shy and rare, difficult to spot, let alone capture. And the ones that were still living in Slovenia, many were too closely related to each other, causing serious genetic problems.
We were still involved in the capturing of the resident lynx. So that was the lynxes from the fragmented, isolated population. We were unlucky or lucky, whatever you choose to pick, to find out that actually one of the resident lynx, which were very inbred with very bad genetics, had actually the heart murmur, which means that the heart sounds doesn't sound like they're supposed to. And we found out they had probably some congenital defect in the heart. So we started to take the ultrasound with us to the field, and we found out that some of the resident lynx have literally the hole in the heart. So between the left and the right heart, there was a hole as a result of congenital defect. And that was like genetically based, and the proof of that the inbreeding was very bad for them because they were passing on this defect to the future generations.
Veterinarians from the Ljubljana Zoo started assisting in the wild, bringing their skills from the zoo into the field. The collaboration led to new medical checks, safer anesthesia, and ultimately healthier animals.
Even though all the coloring and capturing of the animals were done only by the biology team, zoo vets, they are very good in anesthesia, very good in monitoring. They have very various animal species they need to safely put asleep and wake up again in a good condition. The monitoring of the anesthesia, the check for the preventive diseases, and the clinical examination. So this is the thing that we are bringing to the field for the wildlife projects.
At the zoo, these animals may not roam free, but they serve another purpose, giving visitors a glimpse of species they would otherwise never see, even if it lives just beyond the tree lines.
Here at the Ljubljana Zoo, we got an up-close look at the Eurasian lynx, one of Slovenia's most successful wildlife comebacks. These captive animals help raise awareness and support for ongoing conservation efforts for many species, ensuring their future existence in the wild.
This is actually the biggest enclosure in our zoo. It is very well planted. It is in the middle of the forest. We sometimes get some people comments that they're not able to see the lynxes inside this enclosure, especially now during the summer because there are so many leaves and trees around. But if you're determined, it is always possible to see them, and this is actually a natural habitat. You can also see them in the wild. You know, in the wild, the lynxes, they're very secretive and elusive animals, and people are not able to see them. Most people never see them in their lives.
This mix of science, fieldwork, and public education is creating a rare success story in wildlife conservation in Europe. The lynx are back, and this time with a better shot at survival. Gökçen Ardıç, TRT World, Ljubljana, Slovenia.
Bulgaria, the EU's poorest member, is battling a severe water shortage. Scorching heat, drought, and poor infrastructure are worsening the crisis. Teda Imamovic has more.
This is one of the main water sources for Bulgaria's Veliko Tarnovo region. Gorna Studena village, about 30 kilometers from Danube in a fertile plain, has been in a state of emergency since June. Water shortages are a daily reality for its residents. The precious commodity is rationed by zones and hours, but some households go without for more than 2 days. Rumjana Tsoneva keeps finding her tap dry. Even when water comes, it's only temporarily, so her struggle continues. She must decide how to prioritize its use.
Тъй като сега сме на воден режим, ние един ден имаме вода, един ден нямаме вода. В деня, в който ни е графика да имаме вода, си резервирам вода за битови нужди, а за питейни нужди, за готвене, използвам минерална вода, която ми доставят роднини от Велико Търново.
Poor infrastructure and water management have worsened the crisis, with many regions facing restrictions. Farmers struggle to irrigate crops, risking damage to their harvests and potential food shortages.
Виждаме и се убеждаваме в климатичните промени. Те просто са неизбежни, те са наши ежедневие. Но хората сме тези, от които зависи да правим нещо, за да променим, макар и в малка степен, негативното влияние на климатичните промени.
The climate crisis is not the only problem. Mayor Plamen Ivanov says the current rationing system is no longer effective and needs reform.
Имаме много загуби. Загубите са ни, може би, над 60-70% са ни загуби на вода, която се губи в земята. Тръбите са полагани, най-стария ни тръбопровод е 1938 година, аз ви казах. На голяма дълбочина е слагана. Тръбите са слагани над 2,50 на места са 3 метра. Последните 3 години това е третото горещо лято и сухо лято. Това, че примерно май месец паднаха там един месец дъждове, няма голям ефект. Няма сняг. Вече примерно 10 години няма ги тия зими, които имаше сняг по 40-50 см. Това съответно почвата, земята изсъхва. Няма го дълбочинния слой, този, който е надолу с влага.
The ongoing hot and dry summers, along with reduced snowfall in recent years, have intensified water scarcity, with over 156,000 people experiencing water shortages in July. Bulgaria, ranked poorly in the EU for water network losses, must take decisive action to prevent extended shortages and rationing, particularly in regions heavily dependent on limited water sources. Without significant investments and reform, Bulgaria risks greater water insecurity amid worsening droughts. Tejde Imamovic, across the Balkans.
Thank you for watching TRT World and letting us once again take you across the Balkans. That is all from the team for this week. We hope to see you next time.